#idataengineer.
My name is Daniel. Some call me the Data Janitor, and I'm building Pipeline Data Engineering Academy, the world's first data engineering bootcamp. Not one of today's data engineers grew up as a kid imagining becoming one. I definitely didn't. That made me think about how others look at our line of work, and I feel the best way to explain it is through asking a handful of practitioners about their journey and how their work looked like. Who are you and what do you do now?
I'm Adam. I guess I'm a data engineer since I'm here. What I do is I'm providing data to everyone from BI and analysis, providing KPIs, dashboards, and like data for ad hoc. Some projects with statistical modeling, building special pipelines, building the trading pipelines, deployment, operations of this, monitoring of it. And I think also like very generic cloud DevOps things. That's what I do.
Okay. It's a versatile thing. But how do you end up doing all this? Like, how do you end up being a data engineer?
Oh, I think like all data engineers, you start doing something completely different. When I was studying at university, I studied something like applied computer science.
Okay.
So it was more like robot programming, the robot dog soccer stuff.
Mhm.
And then when I finished, it was after the big financial crash. So it was difficult to get a job in that. But I obviously went for a Java enterprise backend job. It was fine for a while. Like I found joy would be too much. I switched a few companies, like did consulting stuff for Java. I was even a Scrum Master part-time, but while being a backend developer. And then I found more enjoyable things. Like I found the Go language where I started developing in, and I found this thing called cloud. I ended up being this kind of like backend architect, DevOps guy at my company, but I was always lacking this convincing arguments to my fellow product people and bosses. So I was thinking, okay, that must be data. Like, so you will convince them with data. So I was looking for an opportunity in data. I ended up at Zalando. It was obviously marketing because most of the jobs in data are in marketing. It was a product team where we did multiple projects. It was the most messy projects I was ever involved in. It had Apache everything from HBase to Spark to like all of it. Lucky for me, because I was touching all of it and I learned what not to use. As long as it was like that, this project was really doomed. In the end, it worked out pretty good when we simplified it radically. It was a very focused, narrow thing. It was the marketing DMP. And then I was looking for something where I could have broader outlook of topics where I can use my skills. So then I joined the team where we met. I could actually jump from department to department, like helping marketing, helping supply, demand, so all of the areas, and use data engineering in general. That's how I ended up being a data engineer.
What projects or tools or trends do excite you these days?
Obviously, it's the simple stuff. I'm super happy that SQL made such a comeback. One of the most successful things we used was dbt. It's a simple idea, gluing macros and Jinja templates together and building SQL. But it's a very powerful concept. And also this project is so simple to use, like it's a command line tool. My experience with dbt is that it encodes so many good practices that I probably wouldn't have thought of at the first time, but would have needed it after all, from writing tests and like how to write tests and like how to snapshot, like when was your source updated. And actually it provides also really nice documentation page where you can like omni search for a column or for a table where you can just remember something. It gave us so many good practices. We ended up, for example, wrapping it in a CI pipeline. So our analysts, domain experts can do the whole modeling of the data warehouse and they get automatic checks on syntax. When we merge pull requests, we run the full pipeline, including all the tests. So we basically catch most of the errors and it saved us so many times from wrong transformations and bad assumptions. This was kind of a power horse for me. Another thing is like I'm still excited about the cloud in general. It might sound funny. It is bullshit, the whole serverless thing. One of my favorite tools is on AWS, Athena, is a serverless offering where you just like have an API where you send SQL query and you put your data on S3 and it just works and it scales like hell. Whenever I have some data to crunch, this is the first tool I'm using. And it's more and more integrated with the Glue Metastore. So you have a nice Metastore where you can put your stuff. I really like to use Athena. I'm aware of the hype, but I think we have to acknowledge that Kubernetes won the whole scheduler wars, and it's going to stay here for a long time. And I believe all the gravity will migrate towards Kubernetes. I believe it's a safe bet to start out still with that. Yeah, it has a lot of quirks still, but there is like a managed offering, so use those. What it enabled us to do, as opposed to before, is that before I couldn't take like an open source project and just host it myself. I don't know, for example, Airflow. We really have such a nice Airflow Kubernetes setup where it scales like infinitely or as much as we want. And I couldn't have done it probably without Kubernetes. Maybe a last tool that I really like, and it's a very boring thing, Trello and GitHub Issues. It's a really simple concept. Whenever I had to use Jira or some very complicated tool, it made the project much, much worse. Small details like this can matter a lot in projects being successful or doomed. You just write text into a text field. That's it.
Thank you. How do you see the role of data engineering changing in the coming years?
For a few years, I expect still a lot of hype and a lot of growth. More tools, more complexity. I think Elon Musk will still get away a few years now claiming that this year he's going to have the self-driving car. And I think people still going to believe him for the next 5 years. So I totally believe there's going to be more Apache, more Spark, more tools which are like rocket science, and most people shouldn't use them. But I think it's good. It's like good for me. This enabled Athena, for example. The Presto engine is great. And yes, don't use it for everything. But if you have such an easy package offering of it, then you might as well use it also when you're starting out. There's going to be a lot of choice, a lot more choice even than now. I expect also some tools to mature, which is also good. I see like the hype as both an enabler and like a burden, especially for people who are starting in this area. It will be much more difficult to choose. If you just count how many things start with SageMaker, how many different products start with SageMaker at Amazon, I don't understand half of what they are for. And I think I don't need to.
What would you advise for these newcomers who are trying to keep their heads, above the water, like, oh, these things are happening? So if someone's starting in data engineering, what should they do?
First and foremost, don't look at your tools, like solve a problem. Find a worthy problem to solve. I think this was a very good teaching from Peter Hintians. He's the inventor of ZeroMQ. This was an epiphany for me, where he said, like don't write these user stories, but try to formulate everything as a problem. I can't make photos with my phone. That's a problem. So now we can solve it. And the good thing about this is like you debate the problem first. If somebody tells you something that they want to have done as a problem, this I found a really powerful concept, to concentrate on the problem first, because half of the things you want to do, you will not do, because you will say, this is the problem. Oh no, it's not a problem. You will find the most boring solution to some of the problems. That would be my advice. Choose mostly the most boring solution, like the most obvious solution. If it doesn't work out, then go for the magic wand big data tools, because most of the problems I see in data, there's no big data. If you have big data, that's the problem usually. The big differentiator between a junior and a senior is not their skills or their knowledge, is just that the more experience you have in some area, you're just not afraid of starting a problem. You're just convinced you can do it, and you do it. This confidence is the most important. Even as a junior, just be confident. It's solvable. Sometimes it won't be, but I think it's still better to try, not being afraid. I think that would be my advice.
Thank you. Do you listen to music while you are in the flow and try to get things done?
No, I cannot. I like silence.
Thank you. You had like great lunch or dinner or whatnot recently? Either you cooked it yourself or just bought in the corner that you fondly remember?
I like to cook, especially now pandemic times call for like these kind of things. That's all what's left for us. I did this the Polish pierogi.
No.
I like that. Especially it's like you can do it with the kids. You can teach them how to build them. These kind of things.
Thank you. If you are a data engineer and you feel like sharing your story, reach out. I'd be happy to chat with you.
#I, Data Engineer.